The Outcast. I am the Good Shepherd, Jesus Christ.
The parish priest returned to the parochial house at Drumullen after a 2-month holiday at the seaside resort of Fionnghuala. He returned fatter than he went, with immense red gills and crimson flakes on his undulating cheeks, with pale blue eyes scowling behind mountainous barricades of darkening flesh, and a paunch that would have done credit to a Roman emperor. He sank into the old easy chair in the library with a sumptuous groan. He was tired after the journey. He filled the chair and overflowed it. His head sank into his neck as he leaned back, and the neck flesh eddied turbulently over the collar of his black coat, toppling down behind in 3 neat billowing waves. He felt the elbow rests with his fat white palms caressingly.
Great chair.
It had borne his weight for 10 years without a creak.
Great chair. Great priest.
His housekeeper stood timorously on the other side of the table, with her hands clasped in front of her black skirt, a lean, sickly woman with a kind white face. She had followed him in, but she was afraid to disturb the great man so soon after his arrival. He sighed, grunted, groaned, and made a rumbling internal noise from his throat to his midriff. Then he said,
"Ha!"
and shifted his weight slightly. He suddenly raised his eyebrows. His little eyes rested on the housekeeper's twitching hands. They shot upwards to her pale face. His mouth fell open slightly.
Well?
He grunted in a deep, pompous voice.
Trouble again? What is it?
Kitty Mannion wants to see you, Father, whispered the housekeeper.
Fool,
said the priest. He made a noise in his mouth as if he were chewing something soft. He grunted.
I heard about her,
he continued in a tone of oppressed majesty.
I heard about the slut. Yes, indeed. Oh, show her in.
The housekeeper curtsied and disappeared. The door closed without a sound. The white handle rolled backwards with a faint squeak. There was silence in the library. The priest clasped his paunch with both hands. His paunch rose and fell as he breathed. He kept nodding his head at the ground. 2 minutes passed. The door opened again without a sound. The housekeeper pushed Kitty Mannion gently into the library. Then the door closed again. The white handle squeaked. There was a tense pause. The parish priest raised his eyes. Kitty Mannion stood in front of him at the other side of the table, 2 paces within the door. She had a month-old male child at her breast. His head emerged from the thick, heavy cashmere shawl that enveloped his mother. His blue eyes stared impassively, contentedly. The mother's eyes were distended and bloodshot. Her cheeks were feverishly red. Her shawl had fallen back onto her shoulders like a cowl as she shifted it from one hand to another in order to rearrange her child. Her great mass of black hair was disordered, bound loosely on the nape of her neck. Her neck was long, full and white. Her tall, slim figure shivered. These shivers passed down her spine, along her black stockinged, tapering calves and disappeared into her high-heeled little shoes. She looked very beautiful and innocent, as only a young mother can look. The priest stared at her menacingly. She stared back at him helplessly. Then she suddenly lost control of herself and sank to her knees. "Have pity on me, Father," she cried. "Have pity on me, child." She began to sob. The priest did not speak. A minute passed. Then she rose to her feet once more. The priest spoke.
You are the housemaid at Mr. Burke's, the solicitor.
I was, Father, but he dismissed me this morning. I have no place to go to, no shelter for me child. They're afraid to take me in the village for fear ye might... Oh, Father, I don't mind about meself, but me child...
Silence!
cried the priest sternly.
A loose tongue is an ill omen. How did this happen?
She began to tremble violently. She kept silent.
Who is the father of your child, woman?
Said the priest slowly, lowering his voice and leaning forward on his elbows. Her lips quivered. She looked at the ground. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She did not speak.
Ha!
He cried arrogantly.
I thought so. Obstinate slut. I have noticed you this long while. I knew where you were drifting. Ugh. The menace to my parish that a serpent like you... Out with it!
He roared, striking the table.
Let me know who has aided you in your sin. Who is he? Name him. Name the father of your child.
She blubbered but did not speak.
For the sake of your immortal soul,
he thundered,
I command you to name the father of your child.
I can't, she moaned hysterically. I can't, Father. There was more than one man. I don't know who.
Stop, wretch!
Screamed the priest, seizing his head with both hands.
Silence! Silence, I command you! Oh my! Oh! Oh!
The child began to whimper. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, muttered the girl in a quiet whisper. The priest's face was livid. His eyes were bloodshot. His paunch trembled. He drew in a deep breath to regain control of himself. Then he stretched his right hand to the door with the forefinger pointed.
Go!
He thundered in a melancholy voice.
Begone from me, accursed one. Begone with the child of your abomination. Begone.
She turned slowly on swaying hips to the door, with the foot movements of one sinking in a quagmire. She threw back her head helplessly on her neck and seized the door handle. The handle jingled noisily. The door swung open and struck her knee. She tottered into the hall.
Away with you,
he thundered.
Begone from me, accursed one.
The housekeeper opened the hall door. She was thrusting something into the girl's hand, but the girl did not see her. As soon as she saw the open air through the doorway, she darted forward with a wild cry. She sprang down the drive and out into the road. She paused for a moment in the roadway. To the right, the road led to the village. To the left, it led to the mountains. She darted away to the left, trotting on her toes, throwing her feet out sideways and swaying from her hips. It was an August day. The sun was falling away towards the west. A heat mist hung high up in the heavens, around the dark spurs of the mountains. She trotted a long way. Then she broke into a walk as the road began to rise. It turned and twisted upwards steeply towards the mountains, a narrow white crust of bruised limestone curling through the soft bogland. The mountains loomed up close on either side. There were black shadows on the grey granite rocks and on the purple heather. Overhanging peaks made gloomy caverns that cast long spikes of blackness out from them. Here and there the mountains sucked their sides inwards in sumptuous curves, like seashell mouths. Long black fences raced majestically up the mountain sides and disappeared on far horizons over their peaks with ferocious speed. The melancholy silence of a dead world filled the air. The melancholy silence soothed the girl. It numbed her. She sat down to rest on the stunted grass by the roadside. She cast one glance at the valley behind her. She shuddered. Then she hugged her baby fiercely and traversed its tiny face with kisses. The baby began to cry. She fed him, then he fell asleep. She arose and walked on. She was among the peaks, walking along a level, winding stretch of road that led to the lake of black hair. A great dull weariness possessed her being. Her limbs trembled as she walked. Her heart began to throb with fear. Her forehead wrinkled and quick tremors made her shiver now and again. But she walked fiercely on, driven forward towards the lake in spite of her terror. She reached the entrance to the valley where the lake was. She saw the lake suddenly nestling cunningly behind an overhanging, mossy-faced cliff, a flat white dot with dark edges. She stood still and stared at it for a long time. She was delirious. Her eyes glistened with a strange light. Then she shivered and walked slowly downwards towards the lake bank, stopping many times to kiss her sleeping child. When she reached the rocky bank and saw the deep, dark waters, she uttered a cry and darted away. The child awoke and began to cry. She sat down and fondled him. He ceased crying and beat the air feebly with his hands. She kissed him and called to him strange words in a mumbling voice. She took off her shawl, spread it on a flat, smooth rock and placed the child in it. Then she tied the shawl into a bundle about the child. She placed the bundle carefully against another rock and knelt before it. Clasping her hands to her breast, she turned her face to the sky and prayed silently. She prayed for 2 minutes, and then tears trickled down her cheeks, and she remained for a long time staring at the sky without thinking or praying. Finally, she rose to her feet and walked to the lake bank quickly, without looking at her baby. When she reached the brink, she joined her hands above her head, closed her eyes, and swayed forward stiffly. But she drew backwards again, with a gasp. Her child had crowed. She whirled about and rushed to him. She caught him up in her arms and began to kiss him joyously, laughing wildly as she did so. Laughing madly, wildly, loudly, she rushed to the bank. She threw back her head. She put the child's face close against her white throat and jumped headlong into the lake.